There we go. Good morning again. Last week was an exciting weekend. Baptisms, lots of them, and celebrating some graduating seniors, and our pastoral candidate was here. There's a congregational meeting after this service in the gathering room to vote on Ben Burdick as our next senior pastor. Everyone is invited to attend, though, of course, only members will vote. Another thing, Alfie's last Sunday is next week, here already. Two things about that. We're gathering a love offering for Alfie and Karen, and if you could have those in, if you want to participate in that by tomorrow, that would be great. Next Sunday evening, we are having a celebration of their 12 years of ministry here. So that's Sunday night, 6:30 to 8 next week. Changes, certainly, but one thing we know always remains constant, the God that we worship. So let's start that time of worship together by standing and greeting one another.
Good morning, World Gospel. You know, Alfie's been in this series talking about Joseph. And you think about the patriarchs, and you can turn me down just a little bit, please. Okay, you think about the patriarchs and the faith that they had to go out, not worry about the world, but constantly look to Him. So let's sing a couple of hymns, just like the patriarchs, trusting in Him. going to go into the prayer hymn, and you're going to be able to see a video of what God has done through the youth. So you just be praying about that and thanking God as you do that. But let's prepare for prayer now. Be seated.
We wrapped up a mission trip. We've been on a rotation, a 3-year rotation, serving in our community, the next year serving domestically, the next year serving internationally. Last year we went to Ecuador. This year, by God's grace, we were planning to serve here in our own community. And that worked out very well this year for many good reasons. And it was a pretty outstanding opportunity to see God work in so many different ways. The week was structured. I'll explain briefly kind of the overview of the week, and then we'll get to hear from these three a little bit more about some of the experiences from the week. We had 27 students. 7 leaders with them, and many other adults helping out in various ways. We stayed at a camp south of town, and that was kind of our base. We would eat breakfast there, and then throughout the day we would go from there to different parts of our community, from West Terre Haute to Brazil, many places in between. And then back in the evenings, we'd come back, eat dinner, and have a Bible lesson time also. We had 5 teams that went out, each in a van going out, serving with kids, with food pantries, different work projects, people from our church and also others we connected with through our relationship with 14th and Chestnut. Tons of stories from lots of people. If you all, let's hear some.
So one of the things that I enjoyed the most, I think I learned the most from the mission trip, was how passionate people that we would look at and think they don't have much reason to love the Lord. Their circumstances aren't great. It doesn't look like He's blessed them. They still really had a passion for Him. And I saw this, I met with some homeless people. I got to talk with them. And they talked about how the Lord was what got them through a lot of the struggles that they go through. The struggles of not being able to find food or shelter, and basic comforts and needs that we just take for granted. And then I also saw it here with Camp Navigate, which, if you don't know, that's a camp for poor children in the community. I had the opportunity to do a Christmas skit for them because they were doing Christmas in July. And after we were done performing our skit, they really wanted to talk with us about the gospel. And they were really hungry to learn more, and just to be able to talk about Jesus. So I found it really eye-opening.
So I was really excited to go on this trip because I didn't get to the year before. And I knew that I'd be challenged because it's a missions trip, and I mean, that's what happens. You're going to be challenged. But I just wasn't sure how. So my team was focused on like volunteer work and delivering cards that we made for people and encouraging people. But when we got our schedule details the first day of the trip, we figured out that we would be painting and scraping in full sun all day on Wednesday. And I was like, okay, that's going to be a little hard, but we can do this. And we got there, and it was about 45 minutes in, and it was like, this is going to be a long day. So we kept working and just like taking breaks when we needed them in the shade and drinking lots and lots of water. And about 2 hours before we were supposed to be done, a lot of us were pretty wiped. We weren't sure we could finish the day. And right when we were done, another team was able to show up and take over for us. And it was the most perfect timing that I've ever seen, and it was just so amazing to see how God provided for us in the exact right moment.
All right. I had the privilege of working with all the youth with Jonathan this week as the student intern, or student ministries intern, and got to see kind of how all the teens grew that week. It was kind of cool to be able to be there and kind of watch, not be a student growing with them, but also be a leader growing and watching them grow under everything God did, and just see their attitudes to everything. I mean, it was a hot week. Thankfully, it didn't rain that week, except for that nice little shower at the end of towards the end of the week. But they had such great attitudes as they served. They didn't complain while they were out in the heat, and that's something that I've seen even adults struggle with that are supposedly fully mature and everything, and they were just really good about serving God and just following along with what their leaders did. Another thing I kind of saw from this week is how the church should be serving locally. Like, it's not hard to go out and mow somebody's lawn in the community. Just pack it up in probably your minivan or maybe the back of your truck and take it over, or just go out and start talking to people and asking if they need yard work, and they'll probably put you in touch with a couple other people that need it, and then you can be the hands and feet of Christ just pretty much wherever you are. And also just how some other people we didn't even intend to be part of the trip. One of the ladies that came and decorated for a couple of the students' birthdays, her husband came and we were talking to him, and he got to help us put in dirt in somebody else's flower bed that we had built for them. And so then he could go plant his flowers this year and not have to worry about finding dirt and paying for it and everything like that. And so just seeing how people that weren't originally part of the trip, God brought them in so that way they could serve better in their community. And that's kind of how the church is. It comes together and helps, and each people might not be good at some specific thing. They might not be good at evangelism, but they're good at helping out and giving resources to somebody else to go out and serve in various different ways. So it was a really cool week to see how God used each person individually, and then also used us together to serve just a wide range, like Jonathan said, Brazil to West Terre Haute, and just be able to serve and show love to people and just be the body of Christ.
So, thank you, you three. we have lots of other stories. And actually, very briefly, if you went on that trip or helped in some way, would you stand up very quickly? And then we'll have a... Excellent. Thank you. We have a brief video, and then we will head into prayer. So grab one of us when you can, when you see us. Let's praise our God right now. Dear Lord, you are great, far greater than we know, but thank you for showing us still more and more all the time. Thank you for these students and adults who committed a week for you. And Lord, it is far more than a week than we have committed to you. And may that be on our minds all the time. To those around us, may we share your truth, your love. Thank you for placing us in this community where you have. May we be great lights for you. Thank you for that trip. Thank you for your sovereignty that we saw. As Kira mentioned just now, about another group showing up at just the right moment. And that happened time after time that week. May we recognize your sovereignty and your hand in our lives and praise you for it. Lord, we know that you are in control. We also know that our sister Joyce has not been doing as well as we would love. I ask that you would give her encouragement, and Gordon too, that you would give her strength, and that you would show her your love more now than any other part in her life. We ask for your healing, Lord. And we know there are many others, those we love. May they shine for you too. Lord, thank you too for the search process and everything that has gone into that. Months and months and even years of planning and preparation and seeking your will. And I pray that your will would happen. I ask for wisdom for this meeting that will happen and your guidance there. Thank you that we can trust in you completely and fully, Lord. Help us do that and continue to worship you this morning and this whole day. In Jesus' name, amen.
So if you don't have it and you can't see it, what do you have right now? Now we're getting some answers from the adults, all right? But we say, we'll just go along with it. You have hope. Would you agree? You have hope. Can we all say together, and this includes all the adults, we have hope. We have hope. Very good. We have hope. You have a longing for that sugary goodness, right? You have an anticipation of unwrapping it and being able to enjoy it. And you have the expectation that I am trustworthy and I am going to give you that sucker when you approach me after the service. Would you agree to that? So you have something, even if you don't have the sucker and even if you can't see it right now. Now the thing is, that hope, if you actually want the sucker, that hope is going to get you and your parents to see me afterwards. That hope is going to move you into an action. You guys see that? Okay. Now, in the grand scheme of things, are suckers really that important? No, they're not. There's things that are so much more important. Having food multiple times a day. For some of us, we eat like hobbits, and it's like 12 times a day, right? Obviously, shelter is important. Getting a good education, even if you disagree, children, even if you disagree, getting a good education is important. Having access to health care, all kinds of things are definitely more important than a sucker. But the things that really, really, really matter are things that are eternal. And they are things that we cannot see right now. Okay? For instance, we cannot see King Jesus on his throne ruling over everyone, including his enemies being underneath his feet. We don't see that right now. We can't see the glory of the eternal life that he's promised for all of those who would put their faith and trust in him. We don't see that right now. We don't see the beauty of the heavenly home that he's promised us. We don't see the comfort that he is giving us and wiping away every tear from our eyes, where there will be no mourning and no crying. We don't see the relief of having every sickness eliminated, including this pandemic that we're in. We don't see the joy of death being destroyed right now. We don't see these things, and yet it is the very things that God has promised us. And I tell you what, God is much more trustworthy than I am. And yet you should definitely believe me that I have suckers for you in the back. If you believe me, how much more ought we then to believe and hope in the promises of God? Now here in just a moment, Pastor Alfie is going to be showing us from Scripture the promises that God made to Jacob and to Joseph and to their lineage. We're going to see the hope, the belief, the faith that Jacob and Joseph put in God and how that affected the way that they lived, the decisions that they made, where they went, all of it. That hope affected them and their lives dramatically. And they are examples to us, to encourage us, and to build our faith. Hebrews 11:1 says, faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we cannot see. So let's have faith. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Jeremy. Appreciate that. And thank you, young people and leaders. It's exciting to learn about what you were able to do on that missions trip locally. God bless you for that. 3 years ago today, Karen and I were in Israel on that sabbatical. What a wonderful experience that was, and how much we learned during that time. On day 6 of our sabbatical, we visited Machpelah, and that is the site of the burial place of Abraham and Sarah, of Isaac and Rebekah, and of Jacob, the patriarchs. They are buried there. Now that happened not quite 4,000 years ago, long time ago. Well, 2,000 years ago, King Herod built this structure on top of the cave in which they were buried. And so when you go there, this is what you visit. It is the second holiest site for the Jewish people, the first being the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Now we read in Genesis chapter 23 that Sarah died. Abraham lost his beloved wife. And rather than take her back to their ancestral home in Ur of the Chaldees, he bought a cemetery plot. The equivalent of that, it was a cave in the ground, from a Hittite by the name of Ephron. And he buried her there. That's emphasized in Scripture, and it is very significant because it shows the faith of Abraham in the future. Just like you are waiting until this sermon is over so that you can get your sucker from Jeremy, so Abraham waited his life long and never did see the promises of God. And that was true of Isaac, and that was true of Jacob as well. They had faith, they had confidence in God, but they did not see it. They had promises. Precious promises that God would make them a great nation. Can you imagine? I mean, our hopes and dreams are tiny compared to that. That they would be the fathers of this great nation, that all the world would be blessed through them, that God would preserve for them a homeland forever. Just tremendous promises, but they never saw it. It was never realized for them. Now today we come to Genesis chapter 47. If you'll find that place in your Bible, Genesis chapter 47. Jacob has come to the end of his life. He is 147 years old. You will recall that the patriarchs had greater longevity than we do today. 147 years old, and he knew that he would die shortly. It's the last year of his life. And one thing that is surprising to us, and maybe you've been wondering, they're not in the promised land. Abraham left Ur of the Chaldees. He went to this promised land, the land of the Hittites and Canaanites at that time, and now they have left that promised land. And so in the end of chapter 47 and in chapter 48, Jacob makes provision. He takes 3 significant steps, and I just want to list those for you right up front. At the end of chapter 47, he makes Joseph promise to bury him in Machpelah. He doesn't want to be buried in Egypt. Secondly, Jacob adopts Joseph's 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. We'll look at that. And thirdly, Jacob blesses Ephraim and Manasseh. And the adoption and blessing are 2 separate things. 2 separate measures that he made. So let's look at the first of these. Jacob makes Joseph promise to bury him in Machpelah. So follow along in your Bibles as I read. Genesis chapter 47, beginning at verse 28. Jacob lived in Egypt 17 years, and the years of his life were 147. When the time drew near for Israel to die, he called for Joseph, his son, and said to him, "If I have found favor in your eyes, put your hand under my thigh, and promise that you will show me kindness and faithfulness. Do not bury me in Egypt. But when I rest with my fathers, carry me out of Egypt and bury me where they are buried." "I will do as you say," he said. "Swear to me," he said. Then Joseph swore to him, and Israel worshipped as he leaned on the top of his staff. All that Abraham and Isaac and Jacob ever had in the promised land was that burial site in Machpelah. A cave, a place for their bodies to rest. Now, why was it such a big deal where Jacob would be buried? And why does Moses record this request and later its fulfillment in Genesis chapter 50? And what possible difference could this make to you and me today? All of these questions are answered together. In human terms, Jacob has little to show for his long life. He has little or no wealth. He has no land. His family members are strangers living in borrowed country among people who do not want to have any association with them. The Egyptians could not stand shepherds. All this old man has is his family and those three promises of God. God had promised the land of Canaan to his descendants. And Jacob is saying here, I believe beyond a shred of a doubt that though I haven't seen it happen, that God will make it happen. Now, when you think about the Christian faith, it is built on promises that we cannot see. We believe in heaven, but none of us has ever seen it. In fact, I doubt that any of us have ever spoken to anybody who has seen it. We believe that there is a home there for us, personally and individually, promised to us by Jesus Christ. We believe that he will take us there, that we will be reunited with our relatives. And we can go on and on and on about the significant promises of Scripture, none of which we can see. A promise is words. You can't see it. You don't understand the realization of it, but we accept it by faith. That is very important. We see that illustrated in Jacob and his life and in these provisions that he makes for his future. Jesus said to us, "And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come and take you to be with me, that you may be where I am." And most of us in this room, I wish it were all, but I'm not sure, most of us in this room believe that with all of our heart. We believe that when we die, we will go to heaven to be with Jesus, and there'll be a place for us there. To Jacob, the promise of God was more important than all the grain of Egypt. He believed God. And we see illustrated very vividly in his life that for him, he didn't have anything except these promises, basically. And he never would see them in his life. But he wanted to make sure that he would be buried there in the land. Everything that really matters to a believer is invisible. Can't see it. We take it by faith. Now, the second point, the second step that he makes is to adopt the two sons of Joseph. Now, this is foreign to us. We've never seen anything like this in the United States of America. It's never happened in any of our families. In fact, it sounds almost odd to us. So we have to try to transport ourselves back nearly 4,000 years to get hold of the mind of Jacob and the significance of what he is doing here. Chapter 48, verses 1 to 4. Sometime later, Joseph was told, "Your father is ill." So he took his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, along with him. When Jacob was told, "Your son Joseph has come to you," Israel rallied his strength and sat up on the bed. Jacob said to Joseph, "God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan, and there he blessed me and said to me, 'I am going to make you fruitful and will increase your numbers. I will make you a community of peoples, and I will give you this land as an everlasting possession to your descendants after you.'" That's essentially the same promise, not exactly the same wording as was given to Abraham and then was repeated to Isaac, and it was repeated to Jacob, and now he's remembering that to his son Joseph and explaining to him this great promise that he has from God. His descendants would become a great nation. Verses 5 and 7. He says, "Now then, your two sons born to you in Egypt before I came to you here will be reckoned as mine. Ephraim and Manasseh will be mine, just as Reuben and Simeon are mine. Any children born to you after them will be yours. In the territory that they inherit, they will be reckoned under the names of their brothers." So here's what he's doing. He is adopting these two sons of Joseph, his grandsons, as his own. And he is making them equal to their uncles. Remember, Joseph is the 11th of 12 sons of Jacob. He has 11 brothers. Now, here's the way inheritance was done back in those ancient times, long, long ago. And as well as I can understand it, not just among the Jewish people. I'm not saying this was the practice among all the peoples of that day, but I do think that it extended beyond the Jewish culture itself. And that is that when a father died, a double portion went to the eldest son, and any other sons received a single portion. So you got a family of 12 sons, right? The estate. Today, most families, if there were 12 sons, they would divide the estate into 12 parts and distribute it among all of the boys, okay? But in ancient times, they divided it into 13 parts, and the oldest son gets 2, everybody else gets 1. Don't get hung up at thinking in modern terms, well, that doesn't seem fair. It's the way it is. This is actually practiced in monarchies today, right? Queen Elizabeth, we hear about her. She's elderly. She can't live forever, right? And so who's going to be the heir? And if he dies before she does, who will be next? And the British are all up in this, and some of you may have read about it. So that's kind of comes from this ancient tradition, which was practiced in ancient days, not only among monarchies and rulers, but among regular people as well. So while Manasseh and Ephraim are inheriting, they will each become a tribe in Israel. If you got a map in the back of your Bible, you got several maps. One of them shows all of the tribes. You will see that among those tribes and their regions in ancient Israel, well, there's Ephraim and Manasseh, grandsons of Jacob and sons of Joseph. So this blessing, while surely it's significant to Ephraim and Manasseh, is primarily a blessing to Joseph. It is Joseph who is getting the double portion. Do you follow me? He has two tribes of Israel that will be descended from him. All of his brothers only have one. And this is because he has been so faithful to God, and this is because he has literally rescued the nation from extinction. By going down to Egypt, by enduring everything he endured, by being faithful to God through all of those trials, and then following God to store up grain for 7 years of prosperity, and now to bring his own family down to be with him. Joseph has demonstrated his faith in the invisible God by casting his lot with the plan of God, not with the Egyptians. You say, how so? Well, think about Joseph, okay? He was given an Egyptian name, and Moses notes that when that happens, but he does not call him by his Egyptian name. He continues to call him by Joseph. But he was given an Egyptian name. He was given an Egyptian wife. Do you remember that? He was given an Egyptian palace and an Egyptian chariot and an Egyptian job, a huge, important Egyptian job. But when it comes to his sons and his grandsons, he has made provision that they will be raised as Hebrews, not as Egyptians. And on this occasion, his father Jacob adopts his two oldest sons. Now notice Jacob says, any other sons you have will be your sons. And we don't really know anything about them, but we only know about these first two adopted by Jacob. By identifying with God and the people of God, we are saying that our invisible God is more important than anything else this world has to offer. Young people, if I could have your attention, and I'll let you determine whether you're young or not. I've been a believer since I was 16. A lot of years. I thank God that he brought the message to me and opened my heart and mind to trust in Jesus Christ. And I've sought to trust him and follow him and obey him, however imperfectly, all these years of my life. And there were pressures then, and there were doubters, and I had unsaved friends, and certainly the pressures of the world were significant, and I was not always successful in resisting them and obeying God as I should have done. But his grace and forgiveness have become more and more precious to me as the years go by. The reason I want to address you specifically is because the pressures today are so much greater and feel to me so much more pervasive. It's more like you are living in ancient Egypt surrounded by those who reject God or any thought of God than at any other time. Our nation acknowledged God, at least tacitly. And even people who were not true believers at least had some respect or regard for God, for the Bible, for Jesus. I believe that is changing significantly. I personally think it's a sign of the end times. So you, young people, are going to have far less encouragement in your faith from people generally. Now, hopefully you will have family to support and encourage you. You will have Christian friends and brothers and sisters and older and younger people in your church, and that will become so precious to you. But I want you to know that you need to keep your eyes on our invisible God and His promises of forgiveness and salvation and heaven and significance in life that can only come by following Him. It can't come by material stuff. It can't come by a great education. I'm not discouraging you in your education. It cannot come by success in business or in any other endeavor or career of life. It can only come by faithfulness to the living God. These people are examples to us. They lived in times and days that were very much harder than the days that your parents and I grew up. And I just believe that your days are going to get harder, not easier. All the more important for you to be faithful to God, to trust in Him and follow Him. Now let's go on to chapter 48, verses 8 to 19, okay? He has adopted these sons and now He blesses them. This is a separate step. Verse 8, when Israel saw the sons of Joseph, he asked, "Who are these?" "They are the sons of God given me here," Joseph said to his father. Then Israel said, "Bring them to me so I may bless them." Now Israel's eyes were failing because of old age, and he could hardly see. So Joseph brought his sons close to him, and his father kissed them and embraced them. Israel said to Joseph, "I never expected to see your face again. And now God has allowed me to see your children too." Then Joseph removed them from Israel's knees and bowed down with his face to the ground. And Joseph took both of them, Ephraim on his right toward Israel's left hand and Manasseh on his left toward Israel's right hand, and brought them close to him. But Israel reached out his right hand and put it on Ephraim's head, though he was the younger. And crossing his arms, he put his left hand on Manasseh's head, even though Manasseh was the firstborn. Then he blessed Joseph and said, "May the God before whom my fathers, Abraham and Isaac, walked, the God who has been my shepherd all the days of my life, the angel who has delivered me from all harm, may he bless these boys. May they be called by my name and the names of my fathers, Abraham and Isaac, and may they increase greatly upon the earth." When Joseph saw his father placing his right hand on Ephraim's head, he was displeased. So he took hold of his father's hand to move it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's. Joseph said to him, "No, my father, this one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head." But his father refused and said, "I know, my son, I know." Okay, so here's another situation that seems strange to us. We seek blessing, though we don't always use that terminology. We want to make our parents proud. We want to make them happy. We don't live for them, we live for the Lord, but it means so much to us when they can affirm us. But the blessing in ancient times was very, very important and was very formal, as you see here. I want you to notice several things. Notice the emphasis on God in the blessing itself, which is recorded for us in verses 15 and 16. May the God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked. He is identifying himself and his family with the God of the Bible, the God of Abraham and Isaac. The God who has been my shepherd all the days of my life. And think about Jacob's life just a little bit. He has not been a model Christian. Now, I know I'm using the word Christian and projecting it back. He has not been a model believer. He's had a rough go. But he is now affirming, God was faithful to me even when I was not faithful to him. Boy, that's beautiful. And then finally, referring to God again, a third time, the angel who has delivered me from all harm, may he bless these boys. That angel is maybe a direct reference to Jesus Christ, but it is referring to God. It is not an angelic creature, okay? 3 references to God, very important. Notice too that this blessing looks back to the fathers who received the promises, and it looks forward to the fulfillment of those promises in the descendants that will come from these people. You and I can see the fulfillment of this promise in amazing ways. In 1948, when Israel became a nation again after nearly 2,000 years, that is one of the most amazing prophecies and fulfillments. And there's all kinds of political talk today. I realize Israel is a secular state. They are not following God, but God is following them. They may not be faithful to him, but he is faithful to them. It has never happened in all of human history that a nation of people will be dispersed into all the world and will come back and exist as a nation again. And you and I witness that today in modern Israel. Okay? So I'm not endorsing Israel or everything its government does. It is a secular state. I am endorsing Almighty God. Okay? Do you see the distinction? Who is faithful to his promises no matter what. There are approximately 14.7 million Jews in the world today, descendants of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Ephraim, and Manasseh, and the rest of the tribes. Not quite half of them, about 6.8 million, live in Israel. Others live all over the world. Finally, you will note that a great deal is made of Jacob crossing his hands. So let me see if I can illustrate this quickly. There are 3 men in front of Jacob, okay? There is in the middle Joseph, and he has positioned his eldest son Manasseh right in front of his father's right hand, so that he will receive the greater blessing. And Joseph has positioned his younger son Ephraim right in front of his father Jacob's left hand, so that Ephraim can receive a blessing as well. And I don't think that Joseph noticed the exchange of hands. Jacob reaches out and puts his right hand on Ephraim like this. He should have done this. This would have been the normal way. That was Joseph's expectation. He reaches out like this and he crosses his hands, placing his right hand on Ephraim and his left hand on Joseph. And then Manasseh, thank you, okay? Ephraim, Manasseh, right? Then he utters the blessing you have there. And I believe, if I've got the order right, then Joseph notices, whoa, wait a minute, the old man, he's losing it. His eyes are going bad. He's gotten confused. And he's displeased by this. But the author Moses has already explained to us that this is very deliberate. It is not the result of senility. All right. So I don't know about you, but I get excited about this stuff, and it's interesting. And you might be sitting there thinking, okay, all right, it's interesting. But number one, what does it mean? What's the significance of it? And number two, so what's it mean to me? A great deal. What it teaches us primarily is that God is not bound by human convention. And this is one of the biggest problems that you and I have as Christians. We want God to do it our way. He is not bound by our expectations and our preferences and our traditions and our culture. And even a man like Joseph, get this, even a man who's been through as much as Joseph and has been so faithful for all of these years, he's displeased by this. Come on, God, that's not the way it's supposed to work. Manasseh is the firstborn. He's the one that I cherish. He's the one that deserves the blessing. I love Ephraim, but they shouldn't be switched. All right, so this really doesn't have anything to do with the birth order of your family and your children. Let me see if I can give you an example. How does life normally work? Have a baby, baby's healthy, the baby develops, and we've got a schedule, at such and such an age, they're supposed to be rolling over and they're supposed to be crawling, and we monitor that very carefully. And then they go to school and they get an education and they go off to college or military or career, and then they get married and then they have children for their grandparents, and then on and on and on. And that's the way it often works. And praise the Lord. But when it doesn't, we struggle. We agonize. And we have brothers and sisters in Christ who've left the faith because God has let them down. Their child was not born healthy. They were not able to have a child. Their siblings all have children. All their friends have children. Everybody they know in the world has children, but they don't. Or they lose a child. Or we get into college, and because of finances or academics or whatever reason, we can't finish. And we can't pursue that career that we've expected all of our life. Or we graduate college and we can't get a job and we're overwhelmed in debt. We can go on and on and on with all of the disappointments in life. And it can undermine our faith. And we turn to God and say, why? Rather than embracing the plan of God. Rather than acknowledging that God's in charge and we're not. Joseph had to do that time and time again. He was sold into slavery by his brothers, barely missing death. He became a slave in a foreign land, had to learn a new language and new customs, and he did. Wow, things were going great, and he was falsely accused by an evil woman and thrown into prison. And you know his story. We've been studying it. It's not the way life is supposed to work. It's not the way it works for most people. So I don't know what has gone off the rails in your life, but God is still God. And we think, well, this is the stuff I can feel and touch and experience. I can embrace this child of mine. I can look at my bank account. I know that I've got a house and a car, and those things don't matter a whit. But we make them matter. And we replace God with stuff. We need to guard our hearts against that. We need to remind ourselves over and over and over again that we need to trust in God. Hebrews 11:21 is the only passage in Hebrews, the faith chapter, about Jacob, and it goes to this chapter. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and worshipped as he leaned on the top of his staff. Wait a minute. Moses, Holy Spirit, why not Genesis chapter 28? Where Jacob saw a vision of a staircase with angels ascending and descending. Man, that would have been a great chapter to highlight in his life. What about chapter 32? He's wrestling with God. He's wrestling with the pre-incarnate manifestation of Jesus. Wow. Why not go there? Chapter 48. Worships God, honors Him, focusing on the invisible things of God, how he's trusting God with his future and with his family and with their destiny, things he never saw. All he had was the promise of God. Everything that really matters to a believer is invisible. A young widow applied this truth at the funeral of her husband. Early 40s, cancer, died. She applied it like this. She held up a couple of magazines that he used to read, had a chair, a little rack by it. Many of us have that. And his reading material, and this was magazines that he read. And she held up a brochure on Porsches. Couldn't go online to look at them back in the day, so you could get a brochure, and he had a Porsche in his garage, still in his garage. He left it there when he went to heaven. Other reading material he had by the chair, and she said gradually he laid all of that aside until the end he had only a Bible and a prayer book. It's all he cared about at the end as he was preparing to see his Maker. And it just illustrates the significance of life. Take all of the material stuff and set it aside. That is hard for us to do. Satan will continually dangle that before us, trying to make that stuff so important to us, and it is not important at all. What is important is the living God and what He wants to do in our life. What is important is the hope of heaven and salvation and the pursuit of righteousness, the worship of God. That's what's important. Everything that's really important to us is invisible. Let's pray. Father, what a beautiful illustration the end of the life of Jacob is to us. Reminding us what really matters. I pray that you'll just drill that into our minds and our subconscious and our hearts, that we would trust in you. And I pray for our young people, Lord. Thank you for them, so precious. bless and encourage them and help them to keep the right perspective. Getting an education, pursuing a career, a marriage, a family, all wonderful, all blessings from God received rightly. But it's easy to get things imbalanced. So bless us to keep our eyes on you. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
What is important is the living God. Let's stand and sing about the one we have believed in.
We have an important congregational meeting. If you will be attending that meeting, if you could just go directly to the gathering room. The chairs are separated to maintain separation. So if you could do that, they'll get started shortly. If you're not going to attend the meeting, just exit as you normally would out this hallway. Thank you. God bless you as you go.